Dr. Liam Omara. Dr. Liam Omara is the endorsed Democratic candidate running for the 42nd Congressional District, which stretches from Eastvale to Temecula. He is a university professor specializing in the history of ideas, the Middle East, and the world. He is also a lifelong union member. Liam is endorsed by the National Organization of Women, the California Teachers Association, the California Young Democrats, People for the American Way, the California Progressive Alliance, and many others. The economic focus in his platform is helping him to build a progressive coalition large enough to unseat the long-term incumbent. Let's give him a hand. After I give the introduction, our candidates are going to have a 5-minute time frame to give a statement as well. Candidate Skyler, right up front, is going to be our timekeeper. He will let you know when you have a minute left and then 30 seconds left as well. Thank you, Skyler.
Hi, I'm Liam Omara, a history professor and congressional candidate in the 42nd District of Riverside County, and I'm running for Congress to restore the promise of those bold progressive visions that built the middle class in the first place. Now, my family is working class. My father worked the docks for 50 years, and my mother ran a child care center. Both were union members. My parents split when I was 4, and I worked a variety of jobs in high school and afterwards. I worked maintenance and construction. I was a union fry cook at Disneyland. I was a casual longshoreman in the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. And I still wear my steel-toe boots because they remind me of who I am. But I jumped into college at around age 30, and like most people, I didn't have a college fund or a family trust fund. I had to work all the way through to do this. I'm now the first in my family with a college degree and went on to a master's and PhD from UC Irvine. My day job is teaching Middle East and world history, and I've been doing that for a dozen years. I'm an adjunct, they call it, which means I teach part-time on 3 different college campuses, often with no benefits at all, and I drive a lot. I spend a lot of time in the car, a minimum of 32,000 miles every year for the past decade. In my classrooms, I have to look my students in the eyes and tell them that policies passed in Washington will rob most of us of opportunities that previous generations took for granted. Many will now graduate with mountains of debt. Right? Education is no longer a path into the middle class. Many Americans cannot afford to buy a home. Many Americans cannot even afford to rent an apartment. I know people with graduate degrees who are living in their cars because the pay in their field is so low and the rent is so high. Anyone in here renting like me? Right? Is the rent too damn high?
Yes.
Okay, so after 40 years of declining wages and a rising cost of living, we've lost 20% of the middle class. Many in the media and politicians will lie to us and avoid talking about the real issues and the real problems dragging down the economy here. No, the stock market is not the economy. It's getting harder and harder to pay our bills, and it's not because we're not working our tails off. And it's not because immigrants are stealing our jobs. It's because of economic mismanagement in Washington. My partner and I struggled to afford health care coverage. Like a lot of us, she went without for many years in order to pay the rent. When she was diagnosed with cancer at age 35, if not for the Medicaid expansion, she could have been in real trouble. I've suffered many years of severe housing insecurity because I chose to maintain my coverage despite its cost. What sense does it make to force people into emergency rooms for preventable illnesses, or to force people into medical bankruptcies and homelessness, or for all of us to pay twice as much as any other country for health care? It's time we start talking about the real issues. A tax system which has made the 1% ever richer, but which has taken $1 trillion in wealth from the bottom 50%. A healthcare system which provides substandard and overpriced care, and not even for all Americans. A race toward automation that has taken millions of jobs and threatens 47% of the jobs remaining. An environmental crisis which literally threatens our existence and demands serious investment to counter. And a war machine which pumps cash from our wallets into a handful of corporations and literally makes us less safe. We should invest instead in American lives. We should train people for the jobs of tomorrow and stop giving handouts to the rich. I think it's time we really put Americans first, not corporations and not the billionaires. It's time for a second New Deal. It's time we ensure all Americans are housed and fed so that people can put their lives back together. It's time we realize the original promise of universal health care and pass Medicare for all. It's time we got ahead of the climate crisis with bold green investment and set free our ingenuity, as we did during the space race. It's time we fixed our aging infrastructure and caught up with the rest of the rich world. The US has gone from first in the world in living standards to 17th. Something has to give. I've spent most of my life studying history and public policy, and I can help lead the needed change in direction. With your help, I'll keep fighting to put our country and Riverside County back on the course that really made America great. I'm Liam Omara, and I want to represent you in Congress.
Wow, candidates, it is very encouraging and inspiring to hear each of you talking about your policies and priorities and why they matter to us, to you, and to everyone here. We are now going to open it up to a question and answer session. Audience members, you may ask individual candidates, a combination of candidates, or ask for the whole panel to address your question. Please keep your questions fair and respectful, as everyone's time here is valuable. Candidates, if you are answering the questions, please keep your answers between 1 and 2 minutes. Skylar again will let you know when you have about 30 seconds left. Audience, please raise your hand if you have a question and we will share this mic here. Our candidates, perfect. Okay, perfect. If you wouldn't mind, if you have a question, to please come line up right over here.
So my question is to the panel. I'll start with the story. So I have a friend. So his job gave him an option. It was, we'll give you a severance package of about 3 months, or you take a significant pay cut. He has a wife, 3 kids, and 2 fur babies. And he has to drive a fairly long distance to work every day. We've heard, regardless of the seat, housing costs and local jobs. I was hanging out with his family the other day, and he can only afford to put $5 of gas in his car, or they wouldn't have dinner that night. So what are your proposals to fixing this issue? For the panel.
Thank you. Would someone like to start?
Okay, so the point that I'll make on this is that wage growth used to match productivity growth. So as our time invested is worth more, we used to get paid more, which means in the long run, we would be working less hours and making much more money. We broke that system 40 years ago, and the problem is entirely in the tax code. The incentives were changed. With the incentives set where they are, the businesses do not want to give us that money because they don't have to anymore. They can keep it for themselves. They can ship it up to the Cayman Islands. They can give themselves fantastically large compensation packages. That's our choice, right? If we put the tax incentives back where they were, the wages will start climbing again, and we would all see significant increases in what we're making here. We're fighting now to get a $15 minimum wage. If you actually looked at productivity changes over the last 40 years here, the minimum wage should be in the 30s, right? In order to actually match our expenses here, we have to start fixing the tax code.
Thank you, candidates. Do we have another question?
Hi there. My question was specifically for Mr. Carlos and Dr. Omara, but I would like to hear from all of the panelists. This has quickly become much more conservative of an area than it was when I was younger. What are your campaign strategies to deal with that? Are you trying to reach out to moderates and Republicans? Are you trying to reach out to people who normally don't vote? What is your plan to get where we need to be to make this county function the way it should?
Okay, first is, the data is pretty consistent on this. Over a 30-year period, populists are our swing voters. Chasing after conservatives as a Democrat, chasing to the right does not work. If you have a choice between a Republican and Republican light, people usually choose the Republican. It has failed over and over and over as an electoral strategy, and it's time we abandon it. There are far larger numbers of people who feel disaffected, who are tuned out from the political system, who feel that no one is listening to them, than there are people that you can possibly sway on the right to your side. So my strategy is first off to go for the disaffected voters, the people who feel that the working class voters, Hispanic voters, young voters who feel that there's no politician who could possibly talk to them, that they don't relate to them. And second, it is to actually reach out on a populist level. You know, Trump won the 42nd district by 12 points. It is impossible for a Democrat to win without picking up some of those voters, right? But not all the people who voted for Trump on the whole racist, nationalist, all that kind of stuff. Some people were listening to him saying, you know what, I'm gonna bring jobs back. I'm gonna open up those factories, right? They heard that and said, you know what, someone's talking about an issue that makes sense to me. And you know, most voters are never gonna pay attention to the details of policy. Trump is clearly not making this any better, but they heard someone speaking about an issue that mattered to them. So the way to win is to talk about those issues. So I am talking about working class issues to people and trying to sway those voters back to me.
Thank you, candidates. Do we have another question? Yes.
Okay, good evening, and thank you all for being here. Imagine that, hopefully elected officials talking to their hopefully future constituents. As an educator of 19 years, 6 years in LA inner city school, 1 year at a public charter school in San Diego, and 12 of them at a local high school. I have a question about education. When I worked in LA, we were swimming in funding. However, here in Temecula, and I imagine it's similar in Murrieta, we do not get as much funds as schools in other high needs locales. I know that these high schools need funds, but so do we. We need funds to support SPED students, to support socio-emotional learning, and to deal with the current scary drug problem our students are facing, let alone just the day-to-day act of educating these students and fostering future voters. What are your plans to positively affect the education system in the area by supporting its students and teachers?
I love that question. Teachers for Change. Who would like to take this one first?
Okay, so I can hit this on a federal and a state level that would actually affect you in more. So first a comment on more the federal level. We've been cutting, or actually it affects a lot of states too, we've been cutting tons of spending all across the country in tons of different ways here. And the federal government used to be able to subsidize a lot of the public education here for universities and whatnot, but instead it's shifted over to loans. So now they give massive amounts of loans to people instead of simply funding. A lot of our public universities used to be tuition free. There's no reason that they shouldn't be again because the money is actually there. They just instead hand it out in loans to people so that the students end up staying in debt, right? And the schools still get what they want. So the system is it's broken, right? And that was a deliberate policy choice. On the local level, I agree with Edison. It's a matter of priorities. You know, we have plenty of money to do this. We're just choosing not to spend it in the right areas. There are two areas that will always increase the amount of spending that you have as the population goes up: healthcare and education. There's tons of other areas that costs will go down over time as productivity increases, but healthcare and education always need people, which means you have to continually add money to the system as the populations go. How many schools have those temporary buildings that just never go away because we refuse to spend the money? How often do we pass bond measures to support things and just take on debt? Why not just actually spend the money? So one issue there for me, it gets back to the question of productivity, right? The productivity has been going up. Why not just tax some of the robots, right? And actually bring in some of the money that's generally being generated in this economy. We have the wealth to do it. We're simply not using it for social purposes. Again, echoing Edison's point.
We have another question.
This question is for Courtney and Edison if he wants to respond. My name is Jacob Baird. I'm Vice President of the High Country Growers Association. And as you may know, there's an estimated 2,000 estimated illegal cannabis farms in the Anse Valley alone, not to mention all over the rest of the county. The current regulatory framework that they came up with, they were going to allow 50 licenses for cultivation, 37 were received, 17 went to the next step, and there's only one going on to the next step to potentially be approved. So my question is, what would be your strategy to work with the other supervisors and our bigoted Sheriff Bianco that has been quoted in saying that THC has no medical value and it was all just a ruse to become legal? What would be your strategy in working with those types of people to make a tax benefit for the county rather than spending millions of dollars in eradication?
directly towards Edison first, and then we'll pass to the right.
All right, so just very quickly, I want to throw my 2 cents on this, because honestly, I think these kind of discussions on some level are BS, because this shouldn't be happening at a local community level in the counties, it shouldn't be happening at the state level. This needs to be solved at the federal level.
Hello.
All right, and we need to start following the damn science. Right? There's been tons of research on this. We know why this stuff works, but there's a massive lobbying effort to stop it so they can get you on more addictive drugs instead. Right? So we need to break through that lobbyist nonsense here. We need to get clean candidates in here that are not taking that money here, and we need to change the damn laws at the federal level so that people on the county and state levels do not have to deal with this crap.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a retired teacher, and I really appreciate hearing from so many other teachers here and people who support teachers. When I retired, I found that I had time to become politically active, and I worked in 2018 on Julia Peacock's campaign, a lot of canvassing and things like that, and we just worked really hard, and I began to feel it was almost a quixotic kind of thing because of the way this district is. And then I saw online that Liam believes he can be Ken Calvert, which I would absolutely love to see. I was just wondering, what are some of the things, I mean, I don't really know how it works, but I mean, is it TV? Is it billboards, signs? Is it just canvassing? What do you expect to do to be Ken Calvert? Because, yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, there's actually a lot to this. It's a really complicated question. And elections do cost a lot of money. One of the things that's hurt the most here is it's very difficult to fundraise in these inland districts. And people have not nationally been paying enough attention to these districts as a consequence. The demography has been changing. The number of Republicans in my district has fallen by 10% in the last 10 years. Almost 10%. It keeps going down. It's mostly the independents, but that's fine. A lot of younger people don't have the sort of like tribal loyalty to one or the other, but there's still voters that we can win over. So these districts can be won. The 42nd can be won, the 8th can be won, even the 50th can be won with the right kind of candidates. You can do these things, but it does take raising money, and it does take a lot of boots on the ground. It takes a combination of them. I really respected the Peacock campaign's ground game, like the canvassing. They did a fantastic job there. But we need to coordinate better with tons of other organizations and campaigns so we don't duplicate efforts. So use our money more wisely, because we're never going to get as much as the Republicans. And we need to increase the amount of money we get. One of the things that I've done from the beginning of the campaign is try to raise the national profile of the district. And I've been picking up endorsements and support from all across the country as a consequence. I've been slowly building up relationships with different groups here, and people are saying, you know, this makes sense, and they're throwing money into it. Yeah, if we can keep building on that, if we can build up the fundraising engine there and build up a larger ground game like that, like you had, we can win this.
Yeah, we were very, I felt that the lack of money was a real problem. And also that she was a teacher, she was afraid to put a sign anywhere except in somebody's yard, because apparently Calvert can put them anywhere they want, but you know, she could get sued or something, I don't know, she put signs everywhere. I felt it was very constrained, and it really, I'm just hoping that we can do a much more widespread one this time.
Well, I bought 1,500 of them. I'm stapling these things up everywhere I can. If anyone wants to help out, I mean, we need more volunteers. I've got tons of them in the car. I mean, I will put these things everywhere. Right?
So we don't have
we will continue to do that. We will do more of that in the general election as well. I will continue to build up in that. You asked specifically about television and billboards. I will honestly argue they're not all that important for it, because it's extraordinarily expensive, and it goes for a smaller and smaller chunk of the electorate. There are a lot of people you can reach with direct canvassing, tons of people you can reach with the social media stuff. There's tons of the texting. We have a fantastic texting operation right now. We've hit about 40,000 people in the first 3 days of this thing. By the end of the week, we will have hit every single Democrat who's voted in the last few elections. Right? There are ways you can actually reach out to people. Right? We can build up the infrastructure to do that.
Yeah, I just got a text from you a couple of days ago. Yeah. Just because I'm a Democrat, I'm like, wow, that's great. Thank you.
Well, I was thinking about the expense of the billboard, and I think that if we put all of our faces on it and shared the expense, we would do okay, and let's get it on the 15. How's that? Yeah.
All right, so Joy, thank you again. I love you. You're fantastic. All right, so we need to change campaign finance laws at the federal level. We absolutely do, and we know how to do it. But you know why we can't do it, right? Because everyone in Congress should be wearing a NASCAR jacket with all their actual owners on it. They're all taking this money. They're all taking this money, right? We need to get them out.
Yes.
To get them out involves us stepping up. And yes, we waste a lot of time begging people for money that we could be spending actually out there doing something, you know, that will make it easier to win these races too. So if more people kind of helped out with those, and got involved, even if you can't contribute more there, you can help spread the word. Right, connect to other people. Today, at this point, it is so easy to raise money digitally, and there are a number of candidates in Congress now who are raising money all over the country digitally without having to make telephone calls because they built those networks. If we can expand our own connections, if we can tap into that same kind of energy, it wouldn't take many years of this for us to actually change the laws because you'd put enough people in office who would actually do it, and then we can stop. Right, so if we step up a little bit here, we can change this system.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is now 8:10. That brings us to the end. I want to have a big thank you to our audience. Thank you for participating. And of course, a big thank you to this wonderful, beautiful art gallery. Thank you so much for allowing us to come here. Thank you to all of the candidates really trying to bring change to our community. Thank you so much, each and every one of you. Can we take a group photo over on the couch? Is that?